coming to my next pattern. This pattern also will look difficult, but trust me, it is a very easy one. So the pattern will now look like this. So first, I will now have to print 5 spaces followed by 5 stars like this. Similarly, in the next line, I want 5 spaces followed by 5 stars. Similarly, in the third line, I want 5 spaces followed by 5 stars. Another 2 lines the same way. Like this. And again, it may look difficult, but it is very much simple. From this program onwards, your perspective towards the pattern programming must be changing a little bit. What perspective we should be having, if you ask me? Watch this. If you now closely watch, you now have 3 elements. What are those 3 elements, if you ask me? First is the number of rows. That is the first element. So the first element that you have to keep in mind is the number of rows. How many number of rows do you have? You now have 5. In every row, how many number of stars do you have? Or before that, how many number of spaces do you have? You have 5. Similarly, in every row, how many number of stars do you have? It's again 5. So you now have 3 elements. You have every row. In every row, you have spaces. In every row, you now have stars also. So you have 3 elements. And to take care of all the 3 elements, I will now appoint 3 people. Who are those 3 people, if you ask me? To take care of the rows or row number, I will now appoint one fellow whose name is I. Similarly, to take care of the number of spaces in every row, I will now appoint one fellow whose name is J. Similarly, to take care of the stars, the number of stars, I will now appoint one fellow whose name is K. So 3 people I have now appointed, I, J and K. I will take care of the number of rows, J will take care of the number of spaces, K will now take care of the number of stars. Now tell me, how many lines or how many rows do you have? You now have 5 rows. So I'll just list out those rows like this. First row, second row, third row, fourth row and fifth row. Like this. In the first row, how many spaces do you have? You now have 5. How many stars do you have? You have 5. Similarly, in the second row, you have 5 stars, 5 spaces and 5 stars. This is how it will look. Keeping this at the back of the mind, let us now start our coding. So since we have to loop so who is taking care of I? I mean, who is taking care of the rows? It is I. So I will now write a for loop like this. I should now go from where to where now? From 1 to 5 he have to go. So I will now tell I less than or equals to 5. And every time you have to increment, so I will tell I plus plus. This is the opening of the for loop. Inside every row, what you have to print now? You now have to print spaces. How many spaces you have to print? You now have to print 5 spaces. So if you now want to print 5 spaces, again, what you have to do, who is the person who is taking care of the spaces? It is J. So write one more loop inside the for loop. So hence you can write it as for, I will now tell J is equals to 1, J less than or equals to 5, J plus plus. Like this. And what should I now be doing here? I now have to print the spaces. So I will simply say system dot out dot print or println. I want the spaces to be next to each other. So I will simply tell print, and within this I will now print a space like this. After which what? Nothing much to do. All my job of printing the space is done. Next what I have to do, after printing 5 spaces, I now have to print 5 stars now. If I now have to print the stars, who is the fellow who is taking care of the stars? It is K. So I will now be writing one more for loop here like this. For int K is equals to 1, K less than or equals to 5, K plus plus. This K, what he is taking care of? He is taking care of the stars. So inside this I will once again tell system dot out dot print or println. It is only print because I want those stars to come one beside the other. So I will tell print, and inside print I will now tell star. And after every line I want the cursor to come to the next line. So what I now have to do, I now have to tell only system.out.println outside both the for loops. So I will tell here system.out.println. What I have to print? Nothing. Just bring the cursor to the next line. So hence I'll print nothing, and I'll now close this for loop. If you now write this much, 100%, you will now be getting the expected output. Really, will it work or not? Let's check it out.